Stephanie, you just mentioned that gentle parenting is something that you are passionate about. To be totally transparent, this was a term I was not familiar with. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old,
Okay.
and my producer Rhonda is about 10 years younger than I am. She's on TikTok, and she said, "Let's do a story about gentle parenting." She had learned
Okay.
about it on TikTok. Um, Talk to me about, what do you understand gentle parenting to be? What are kind of the key principles that make up the gentle parenting style?
So there are words that everyone's familiar with already. Those are respect, empathy, boundaries, and understanding. So, okay, great. What does that mean though? It is at its core, gentle parenting is actively living the idea that your children are their own people. They are unique individuals and not just an extension of their parents. And so by getting on board with that idea that they're not just a kid, they are adults in training, really.
Mm.
So we want to model that behavior that enforces kindness, understanding, empathy. You said you have a 3-year-old. I have a 4-year-old, just turned 4. So when they are in tantrum mode, it can be kind of a go-to reaction to just respond to that tantrum, the screaming, the irrationality that's just part and parcel of being a toddler. They are not rational people yet, but we have to teach them to get to that point by modeling that behavior. So they could be screaming about, I want the purple cup instead of the blue cup, which has happened at my house a few times. I've found much more success with getting down on the floor with her, giving her a hug, and saying, I know you're upset. This sounds very frustrating. And these are all things that people might think, well, why would you talk to the kid like that? They don't understand those rules or those words. It's more being calm,
Mhm.
being respectful, kind of like, would you yell or raise your voice at a coworker? No. So these little people who then become tweens and teens and young adults, the earlier you start them on that path of empathy and respect and cooperation, we're a
Mm.
family, we're in this together.
Mhm.
Um, Gentle parenting is not about blame, shame, or guilt. And that's where I think that's where a lot of parents struggle, is parents don't want to shame their children. That sounds horrible, but when you enforce punishments that are unrelated to the action you want to correct, so you hit your sister because you were mad, now you're grounded from TV. What does TV have to do with it?
Mhm.
So parents can struggle with, oh, so I'm not supposed to discipline my children. That's not it. But it's inform them about why the action was wrong. Talk with them about, I feel sad when you do that. Do you think there's another way you can do that? And that's not about guilt. That's meeting them where they're at with their frustration and their um, just uncertainty. Their brains are they're not fully done yet. They have a
Yeah.
long way to go.
Yeah.
So a hug, a calm voice,
Mhm.
that goes such a long way. And they remember that. Our bodies remember emotions and connection more
Yeah.
than we ever remember words.
Yeah. Um, Thank you, Stephanie. That was so beautiful. And, a question that I had for Sarah, and she did address it, but what does that look like? And I want to be conscious of your time. What does that look like and I don't know if you have kiddos, if you have multiple kids or one, but what
Yeah.
does that look like in a sibling relationship? Something that we're running into in our home. Because I feel like, okay, that
Yeah.
sounds great. If I've got one child who's
Yeah.
having a tantrum and I can hug
Yeah.
that one child and help calm them. But what about if we're running into a situation where they feel blame from one another? And when
Mhm.
I go to hug one to calm them, the other feels like I'm giving that child preferential treatment. They want that immediate hug. How do I handle that as one parent when I can only give one hug at a time? Or is it
Right.
I bring them together and hug them both to try and
Right.
calm them both? If emotions are high and there's yelling and screaming, they both need that calming attention. There's only one of me.
Mhm. Um, so I do have multiples, um, and they do fight and they argue, and literally 10 minutes later, they're playing together again and they're having a great time. So I don't know, I guess I would just call it a distraction. So if they're kind of at each other's throats and you took my toy, um, I'll do something kind of out of the ordinary. Like I'll just sit on the floor. And it's kind of like, what's mom doing? I can kind of see that go across their face. Um, One of them or both of them will typically come to me because it's like, wait, what are we doing now? What is this? And if one of them is more escalated than the other, and that's usually the case, um, I'll immediately touch them, put my hand on her shoulder, on her leg, and say, okay, what's going on? And I approach it like a conversation.
Mhm,
And parents are busy. Most parents work outside the home.
mhm.
It sounds like it's going to take a long time. It's not. This is not a big, you know, board meeting or something. This is a short. We work in brief intervention here at the hospital. We're not with patients for months on end. So it's a brief intervention at their level, physically and cognitively. Why are you sad? Why are you mad? Do you need a hug? With my oldest, it's usually she wants to go up to her room and take a breath, kind of chill out a little bit. My youngest is much more um, emotional and emotive, just outwardly very upbeat. She's a hugger more than my oldest. Um, so I know that about them, and my husband knows that about them. And so we just try to talk it out,
Mhm.
and that takes so much practice. It
Yeah,
really
yeah,
does.
yeah.
There is no such thing as a perfect parent.
Mhm.
It's a daily choice. It's a daily effort. How can I be better at this? And how do I want my children to respond? If I yell a lot, my kids are going to yell a lot. So it takes a lot of work. It's not hard work, but then you do notice that the atmosphere in the room isn't so heavy. It's not
Mhm,
so intense.
mhm,
Um, Kids feel like this is a safe space for me.
mhm,
If I'm going to get upset, that's okay.
mhm.
I tell kids here all the time that I work with, it's okay for you to feel your feelings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Do you see, Stephanie, are parents in West Michigan using this? Are you hearing more about it? I think, tell me, kind of gauge, if you can help me gauge, you're more involved in the quote unquote parenting world than I am, even though, of course, I am a parent. We have
Yeah,
shockingly
yeah,
few parents in the newsroom as my colleagues, to be honest.
yeah.
But are you hearing of this more in the West Michigan community?
I am, and it's not always described as gentle parenting as that term. Um, I've heard versions of it that take from the same principles of gentle parenting, and it be called mindful parenting. So that's a focus on we're right here in this moment. It doesn't feel great, but we have to acknowledge and respect what's happening in the moment. And how you do that with your kids is get on their level, use a calm voice, and validate their feeling. I know you're upset. I know your sister made you mad. How can we work to feel better? And I'm not using big terms there. So in West Michigan, I have seen a lot more just on Facebook. So different friends that I've made over the years. Um, Unsurprisingly, a lot of my friends are in social work and counseling. So we do get into these discussions online, if someone's LMFT, like a licensed marriage and family therapist, for example, we'll share tidbits and, oh, I just read this article and I read this article. So it's becoming more of a conversation. I'm seeing a lot more in the community, whether it's a flyer on a telephone pole or my neighborhood association is having an event going on, and they're using terms like gentle parenting. They're using terminology like mindfulness at home, how to parent with love, love first kind of a principle.
Mhm.
So not, I'm in charge, I'm above you, and you're below me. These are the rules because I said so. Gentle parenting does not follow that because I said so kind of old school mentality. And I think it's to the benefit of our kids. Kids are learning more about empathy in school. Kids are learning about mindfulness in school. And it's really nice to see all that happening in West Michigan. It really is.
Yeah. You just answered my follow-up question, Stephanie, because I was going to say, does that excite you? And maybe if you want to add more to that, but you did a fabulous job answering it. Does that excite you to see this sort of catching on? Words matter so much, and to
Yes,
see
yes.
those words being used, it's exciting.
It is exciting. It's exciting because I feel like it's another major step in the right direction in honoring we'll call it personhood of our little ones. They are their own people and they're going to grow up to be their own adults. So it's exciting because I feel like we are just kind of at the beginning of teaching kids to be more understanding, more patient, more aware of what's happening emotionally and physically in their bodies when they're upset, so that they can notice those warning signs. I don't feel so great, or I don't like this situation right now. How can I calm myself down? And like I said earlier, our bodies remember feelings and emotions more than we remember specific words. And so as kids get more and more exposure to their parents and guardians being gentle parents, that's going to stick with them in the long term. I think we'll have more cooperation as a society, the more that we respect one another as, you're a human being, I'm a human being. How can we find common ground on some of these things? Um, so I have a lot of hope. I really do. I wouldn't be a social worker if I didn't have that hope.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Stephanie, thank you. And thank you for being on the front lines. What you do is not easy.
Oh,
And I have so much admiration and respect for what you do. So
thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else that you would like to say from your perspective that maybe I didn't ask you about?
Yeah. So within my scope of practice, working with teens and adolescents and their families, sometimes gentle parenting techniques and gentle parenting principles are not enough. That comes into play if you notice your child is withdrawing from normal activities, if you notice they are not eating normally. Typically with severe depression, people will start eating a lot less. Sometimes people do start eating a lot more, but I'm thinking specifically about young adults. They will kind of pick at their food. They won't want to eat at the dinner table with everyone, more time in their room, things that they had once enjoyed, they don't seem to care about anymore. Those are very clear warning signs that their mental health is suffering. And that's when you kind of need to be a little more upfront with them. You're not texting your friends anymore. You've skipped softball practice this many times this week. What's going on? If and so confronting that, because first and foremost, safety is paramount for everyone, but especially for a teenager who may um, be less apt to talk with mom, dad, grandma, uncle. They don't know what they need quite yet, and so they might think they're crying out for help, but you might not notice it.
Mhm.
So don't be afraid to ask. I tell parents this all the time. If they keep going in their room with the door closed, give a brief knock, say, I'm coming in, and go in.
Yeah.
They're going to be upset with you for doing that, for breaching that boundary. And gentle parenting is about boundaries, but sometimes you have to do that.
Absolutely.
Also, in instances for anyone, whether you have a 1-year-old or a 17-year-old, if they seem to be in imminent danger,
Oh yeah.
you have to respond
Mhm.
as if it's life or death. And so it could be a toddler getting too close to the top of the basement stairs. You swoop in, you pick them up. You don't have a discussion about it. Um, and if you learn from a friend or a family member that your teen is struggling with severe depression, um, maybe even expressing suicidal ideation, you have to step in
Mhm.
because their lives depend on it.
Mhm. 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 Absolutely. Stephanie, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
no
know that you're
problem.
busy with a lot on your plate, and I'm just deeply grateful.